When I was in high school, I was what you would call a nerd. Back then, it was not a term of endearment like it can be today. I hear people all the time now wear that word like a badge of honor. For my friends and me, it was like getting hit in the stomach repeatedly. High school was just different then. We would get beaten up for not liking the same music or not being into sports. Seems cliché, but it's the truth. Junior year was the worst year for all the bullying. This kid Steve tormented us all year. Towards the end of the school year, Steve thought it would be a good idea to break into the school to play one of his stupid pranks just because he wanted to prove how cool he was. Well, Steve was so cool that he ended up getting caught. Before I continue, I should lay a little bit of groundwork first. My school is now closed, but back then it was one of the more popular private schools in this area. We had to wear uniforms and go to regular church services during school hours. The school was very old, and before being converted into a school, it was some sort of hospital for the sick. I remember hearing that when they built the school in the 50s and tore up some of the ground, they found a ton of skeletal remains from people who had passed away from tuberculosis, among other things. Because people didn't want to get sick, they would just dispose of the bodies in this underground tunnel that used to connect the hospital with another building. These stories, whether they were true or not, became the stuff of legend around my hometown, especially for students of the school. In other words, they were almost passed down like urban legends. The school being so old and looking old, I might add, was just an objectively scary place sometimes. Rumors started to swirl around that the school was haunted, like souls not resting properly, and all that fun stuff. You would constantly hear strange noises all the time with no explanation. And it was just your typical school spirit response to say, "Yep, those noises must just be the ghosts." However, the more logical answer is that the school just made a lot of noise because the building was old and falling apart. Sorry for that detour. Back to Steve. The reason why Steve wanted to break in was that he wanted to pull this elaborate prank. He successfully broke in, started ripping classrooms apart, throwing papers everywhere, and even went to the library and pulled tons of books off the shelves. You're probably wondering how Steve got caught. Well, to cap off his ghostly prank, he went to the art room, stole red paint, and started writing a message across the lockers. Your typical horror movie tropes. He wrote things like, "Get out, your soul is next." And my personal favorite, "Death is coming." While he was writing on these lockers, Steve claimed that he heard something coming from the basement. According to Steve, he went to the basement door, and before going downstairs, he saw shadows moving and heard voices talking from the darkness below. He said it sounded evil and not just like normal whispers. Scared him so badly that he ran. It didn't take long for them to match his handwriting with that of the red paint on the lockers. My school had enough of Steve's nonsense, and they expelled him that week following the investigation. I'll never forget Steve screaming as he was leaving the office, screaming about something evil in the basement. His words, not mine. I was confident that Steve was making it up, doing anything he could to save himself. Everyone was so sad about Steve, except for my few friends and myself, who hated the kid. In our opinion, he got what he deserved. For the last few weeks of school, we had to listen to everyone talk about how brave he was and how he could have died. Yeah, I'm not even kidding. These fools really thought that Steve was in danger from evil spirits. As school was wrapping up for the year, I suggested something crazy to my friends. On the last day of school, we should break into the school and do what Steve couldn't. We could prove that there are no evil spirits, no ghosts, and most importantly, that Steve was a lying punk. My friends agreed. The plan was just to break in quietly, make our way to the basement, prove that it's just a basement, and then leave. If we heard anything, we run. We don't get caught as Steve did. We thought that if we ran and didn't get caught, nobody would accept us because we were the nerds, the teacher's pets, the fools that actually liked to learn. We weren't the type of kids to do something like this, especially after someone got caught. I remember the night vividly. It was cold for an early summer night. We all had sweatpants and jackets on. We really embraced the whole criminal breaking in identity. We had our hoods up and tried our best to be sneaky. Breaking in wasn't exactly hard for us. Not because we're these master criminals, but because my friend Carson's mom was a janitor for the school and had access to a key, half the reason we decided to do this. Carson swiped the key and we just walked through the back door of the school. I will admit it was objectively unsettling in there. Anyone who's been in their school after dark knows the feeling. I don't know if we're hardwired that way, but there's just something about being in the school after dark that's unnerving for us. Maybe it was just the years of hearing about all the ghosts. I sort of figured I was subconsciously fearing evil ghosts. Urban legends are a powerful thing. We eventually got to the basement, and I have to admit I was feeling something. I don't know about my friends, but I was actually kind of scared. I didn't tell them that because I didn't want them to make fun of me. My logic in that moment was that I was here and I'm going through with this. We opened the door and didn't see anything. It was a dark staircase that led to an even darker basement. Carson led the way and we followed. Cell phones weren't exactly popular yet, and they most definitely didn't have flashlights yet, so we were using straight-up dollar store flashlights. As we made our way downstairs, the basement was creepy, obviously. It was an old building with a dusty basement. There were boxes of storage everywhere. We looked through a few as we walked through the basement. It was old textbooks, Christmas decorations, and extra school uniforms. Probably the creepiest thing about the basement for me was all the old religious statues. I'm weird, but for some reason old religious statues scare me. They're just unsettling to me, like old churches freak me out. We continued exploring the basement for a few more minutes. We didn't find any people, but we did find out how massively huge the basement was. Felt like it extended forever. Our flashlights weren't even powerful enough to see the end of the basement from where we were standing. I know they were cheap flashlights, but still. Eventually, we made our way to one of the corners of the basement. It felt colder for some reason. We moved some of the boxes and couldn't believe our eyes. There was a small hole in the wall. I would say probably the size of a large beach ball. It was small, but large enough to crawl through. Carson wanted to check it out, but we were against it. Instead, we shone the flashlight through the hole. It was just dark. It looked like a tunnel. We all had the same idea. This was probably the remains of the tunnel where they had stored all the bodies back in the day. Carson convinced us that we had to at least crawl in a little bit and see. If we really wanted to prove there were no ghosts, we needed to check that spot. We played rock, paper, scissors to see who would go first, and I lost. I started my crawl through the dark tunnel and I heard something. I stopped because I thought I had to be hearing things. I could hear my friends laughing because I had stopped already. I told them to shut up because I heard something and I was trying to listen as hard as I could. I could clearly hear something, but I couldn't tell what it was. The only way I can describe it is that it sounded like whooshing. Not like wind, but something else. I shouted down the tunnel and the whooshing sound slowly sounded like it turned into a whisper. I kept asking if anyone was there, and the whispering continued and grew louder. Then it was just quiet. I could hear my friends asking me what the holdup was, but I couldn't answer. I just sat there in the tunnel using my flashlight to give me any answer. I crawled forward a little bit, and then my flashlight picked up something. Squatting in the tunnel, maybe 15 feet away from me, was a person. They looked old and decrepit. I shouted but didn't move. The person just stared back at me with vacant eyes and this unsettling half-opened look. He had no shirt on and was extremely skinny. I could basically see his ribs. I asked if they were okay and they didn't move. As I tried to crawl backwards, the person literally lunged toward me in that squatting position. He was making this unnaturally weird noise. Trying to crawl backwards while staring at this person was the worst experience of my entire life. My friends were confused until I finally cleared the tunnel and they saw this person crawl out after me. As he took a step out of the tunnel, he tried to grab me like some feral human being. We sprinted to the stairs and never looked back. As we got to the top of the stairs and closed the door, we could hear the person in the basement, but they stopped chasing us. As we got upstairs, we ran out of the school and back to my place. We couldn't explain what we saw. Don't get me wrong, I'm sure this wasn't an undead evil spirit, but that doesn't mean I can explain it. The best answer I could come up with was that the tunnel must empty out somewhere, maybe a sewer of some kind, and this homeless person or crackhead must live on the streets. Or at least they used to until they found the shelter under the school. That was my logical answer then, and I still stand by that to this day. The one thing I can't get past is the eyes. This person had eyes I had never seen before, and I haven't seen them since. The school shut down several years ago, And when it did, I thought about that night and wondered if the tunnel was still there. If by some chance this was some sort of ghostly figure. I just hoped that tearing down the school helped him find peace. As great as the end of the school year is, there's nothing better than the parties that follow the end of the semester. After high school, all my friends went to colleges that were all over my home state and beyond, myself included. My college was 8 hours from where I grew up and 2 states away. I couldn't wait to get home after finals so I could see my friends again and, more importantly, party it up. We had already planned this huge party at my friend Logan's house. His parents had this mansion in the middle of nowhere with the pool, a huge backyard with a bonfire, and tons of places to crash. It was an ideal location for a party, especially because his parents were going out of town the first weekend that we were all going to be home. It was like the stars were aligning for all of us degenerates. Before the party started, I met up with Logan and a few other friends. We went to the mall, grabbed some food, and shared stories about our college experiences so far. A more accurate way to put that is we shared stories about how the party scenes at our colleges were. Before the party, we talked about ways to spice things up. How could we make this party more epic than it was already going to be? Logan suggested making it a costume party. It seemed like a weird idea for the end of May, but since we were away in college for Halloween, this would be our Halloween party. It didn't take much to convince us. We spread the word around and told people to come in costumes if they were able to on short notice. People loved the idea. I posted something on Instagram about the party so my college friends could see that I was just as much a degenerate at home as I was away. We found candy corn at one of the local grocery stores, and that was the extent of our Halloween setup. We all threw together cheap costumes at the last minute and got ready for people to start showing up. I decided to take an old cheap Jason hockey mask I had lying around in the basement and go as Casey Jones. People started shuffling in around 10 that night with drinks and makeshift costumes. The Purge was new around this time, so most of the girls were wearing a Purge-inspired costume. Before we knew it, the party was out of hand. Just like a lot of parties we threw in the past, a lot more people showed up than we had invited. Since Logan's parents weren't home and we didn't really have to worry about neighbors, he didn't care and just kept letting people show up. I lost track of how many people were there, and because of the costumes, I really had no clue who was even there other than a few of my close friends. A few hours into the party, I was acting a fool on the back deck telling drunken stories. I looked up at one point and noticed a girl with one of those cool masquerade ball masks on inside the house. It looked like she was staring right at me through this sliding glass door. I waved and she waved back. She was standing alone, drinking something out of a red cup. I asked the people on the deck if they knew who she was, and nobody had any idea. I went inside to talk to her, but as I got closer, she walked away into the house. By the time I got inside, she was gone. I looked around quickly, but I didn't see her. I wasn't sure if she was trying to play some type of game, but I didn't want to be creepy in case she wasn't, so I went back outside. Some time had passed and I hadn't seen the girl. Every few minutes, I would scan the area and look for her, but I didn't see her. It was a few hours later before I saw her again. I jumped into the pool with my mask still on. While I was swimming, I looked up and saw her walking towards the back of the yard by herself. Logan didn't have a fence. It was a huge yard with a tree line in the back that emptied into a small forest. She was heading for the trees. I shouted for her a few times and it seemed like she couldn't hear me. It didn't help that I didn't know her name, so I was just yelling gibberish in her direction. When she got to the trees, she stopped. She looked back at me and waved again. I jumped out of the pool. I looked around me to make sure she was waving at me, and she clearly was. Even though she was a good distance away from me, I could clearly see the bright gold mask. While I was waving at her, she gestured for me to follow her into the woods. I didn't even think twice about it. I sprinted to the tree. She was far enough away that by the time I got there, she wasn't standing there anymore. To give you an idea of just how far the pool was from the tree, I could barely hear the loud music from standing next to the trees. While standing at the trees, I started saying things like, "Hello?" and "Are you there?" As I said before, I didn't want to creep her out by following her, even though she did gesture for me to do that. I was trying to look into the dark forest, but I couldn't see her. I was looking for the reflection of the moon off the gold mask. After a couple of minutes, I said that I was going to head back to the party because I was freezing. After I got out of the pool, I never put a shirt or pants on, so I was standing there shivering with nothing but a cheap plastic hockey mask and a bathing suit. I had gotten so excited to meet this girl, I just ran off without drying off. As I turned around to head back to the party, I heard a voice. She said softly, "Don't go back yet. Come and find me first." That was all I needed to hear. I turned back around and continued looking through the dark trees. I kept telling her I couldn't see her. I heard a branch snap to my left, but then her voice to my right. She said that she was just over here. She started acting flirtatiously. She said I looked cold and that she could warm me up. I know that's weak for sure, but it worked on me. I started heading into the forest towards her voice. A few feet in, I saw her gold mask on the ground. Picked it up. It really was a cool mask. I walked a little further into the woods. This little dance we were doing had me so invested I had forgotten how cold it was in that moment. I finally saw her standing a few feet away from me. It was dark, so I couldn't see her face. She had a white tank top on, black shorts, and her dark hair was down over her face. My smooth line to her was that I found her mask. She laughed and thanked me. She asked if I could bring it over. I started walking towards her and she didn't move at all. She didn't even extend her arm to grab the mask. As I got closer, I could see that her head was down a little bit and her hair was still obstructing her face. I started to extend my arms to hand her the mask and told her that my name is Kip. That's when she said, "I know who you are." I finally recognized the voice, but I couldn't place it. It was familiar, but I just couldn't place it at that moment. I thought it had to be a girl I went to high school with. When I was only inches away, she finally lifted her head up. That's when I recognized her. It was a friend of a girl that I dated briefly in college. Remember, my college was 8 hours away. What the hell was she doing here? She took a step back and from my left, I heard the sound of branches snapping again. I looked and before I could react, my ex was heading toward me fast, holding a metal baseball bat. She took a swing right from my head. I dove to the ground and somehow she missed me. I heard her scream and then she took another overhead swing with the bat and missed again. I got up and ran. That's all I could do. I just kept running all the way back to the party, screaming that someone was in the woods. That put a downer on the party immediately. I was cold and shaking with adrenaline. Logan kicked everyone out except for a handful of people who were staying there that night, but he refused to call the police. He didn't want to get in trouble for having the party. I clearly couldn't drive, but I was terrified all night. I made sure Logan checked every lock in the house. I watched out the back windows the entire night, but never saw anything that I could confirm was them. The tree line was so far away that I couldn't even tell if they were standing back there. As soon as the sun started to rise, I got in my car and left. I couldn't believe this girl traveled 8 hours to attack me. Maybe even worse. I didn't realize that I had such an effect on that girl. We only dated for a few weeks and I ended things because she seemed a little unhinged. She constantly wanted to see my phone and my emails, which I hated, but I never refused. I would go back to my dorm after class and she'd already be in my room asking why I was 2 minutes late. It was just too much, especially for something that was only a few weeks in. Well, my harmless breakup must not have been that harmless after all. I spent the rest of that summer constantly looking over my shoulder. Every time I saw a girl who even remotely resembled her, I got in my car and left. I can say that she helped me mature, even if it was unintentional. I stopped drinking and even partying hard after that night. She didn't go back to that college after that summer, and I never saw her again. For a while, I tracked her on social media, but eventually she got rid of that. Be careful what you say to people. Sometimes what you say may seem harmless to you, but it can have profoundly different effects on other people. I can't imagine the thought process of driving that far and planning to cause harm like that. If she had made contact with the bat, I don't think I would be sitting here writing the story today. Last year, I got my first real extended job as a substitute teacher. I had subbed all over the area for a while, but in April of last year, one of the teachers in a school I subbed at often went out on maternity leave. From April until the end of the school year in late June, I served as one of the history teachers. Honestly, my few months there were great. Being a substitute teacher can sometimes be a nightmare depending on the school and age group you're with. Specifically for this job, I was teaching seniors in high school. By the time April hits, a lot of the seniors are already feeling the effects of senioritis. In other words, they're checked out. For my few months there as the teacher, I kept lessons brief and fun. At this point in the curriculum, the students were learning about government. Instead of just drowning the students in lectures and notes, I focused more on healthy debates and how to communicate with people who may not agree with your political ideas. It may seem controversial, but it ended up being rewarding. Before I knew it, finals were over and summer vacation was about to begin. The last day of school was always a half day with an awards ceremony. After the ceremony, the students began to slowly leave for the summer. Many of the seniors were doing their final goodbyes. During this time, I went back to my classroom and started cleaning up. I wanted to make sure everything was put away and perfect for when the original teacher came back in the fall. When I was almost done, the principal saw that I was still there. He asked me to walk with him so we could talk about my future. We talked for almost an hour. He was impressed with my teaching style and said he was going to try to find a way to hire me in the fall. This made me so excited. We started leaving at the same time, and before I got outside, I realized I had forgotten my purse in the classroom. I said goodbye to the principal and made my way to the classroom. The school was almost empty by this time. I think maybe a handful of teachers were still there. When I got back to the classroom, I was startled. Standing next to my desk was one of my students, a brilliant but quiet kid that I'll call Ben. I asked what he was doing, and he just looked at me and shrugged. He didn't say anything. Then I asked him if he was okay, and very quietly he said he was fine and just doing some thinking. I told him that he couldn't be in there, and unfortunately he needed to leave. I was uncomfortable with this situation because I didn't know the protocol for a situation like this. I didn't want to just leave the kid alone in the school. While I was trying to process the situation and think about what to say next, Ben slowly started heading for the door. I was relieved that he was finally leaving. When he got to the door, he stopped. He didn't look back at me. He just continued looking forward and then said, "Thank you. I'm sure I'll see you around." That may seem harmless, but I wish you could hear how he said this. It just felt so weird. Everything about this entire interaction made me feel uneasy. Once he walked away, I went to grab my purse so I could finally leave. I usually leave my purse in one of the desk drawers, but my purse was on the chair next to the desk. Instantly, I assumed Ben tried to steal something from my purse. Why else would it be on the chair? I checked the inside of the purse frantically, but everything appeared to be there. Even all the cash in my wallet was still there. I figured that Ben tried to steal from me, and his conscience must have gotten the better of him. A few nights later, my husband and I were enjoying the beautiful summer night with a fire in the backyard. Our 7-year-old son was staying the weekend at his cousin's house, so we were enjoying our alone time. While we were outside, we heard a strange rustling sound coming from behind the shed. I kept telling my husband that it was probably a rodent and to just leave it alone for right now. Around midnight, we decided to head inside for the night. Just before going in, my husband said he was going to check out the shed. I told him not to get sprayed by his skunk, and then I went inside. I started getting ready for bed, and I realized my husband was still not inside. When I got back downstairs, he was just coming back inside from the backyard. He said when he initially looked behind the shed, he didn't see anything. When he walked around to the front of the shed, he noticed that the door was slightly opened. He looked inside and saw what looked like muddy footprints, but he wasn't 100% sure. That's when he went back behind the shed to investigate further. He said it looked like the muddy ground back there was stepped in, but again, he couldn't be sure. He thought maybe his anxiety about the situation was causing him to see patterns that weren't there. I wasn't as concerned as he was. It's incredibly likely that he just left the shed door open. The next morning, I woke up before him. I went downstairs to make my coffee, and I noticed that the back door was ajar. Like it was mostly shut, but not all the way. I assumed that after all the commotion with the shed the previous night, he must have forgotten to shut his door. I shut and locked the door and went about my day. That night, He stayed up late to watch a baseball game, and I fell asleep on the couch waiting for him. After the game, he woke me up and we went upstairs to bed. Once I was in bed, I couldn't sleep for some reason. I kept moving around trying to get comfortable. Something just didn't feel right. Since I couldn't sleep, I decided to get out of bed and go read some of my book in the living room. I quietly snuck out of the room so I didn't wake up my husband. When I started walking down the hallway, I froze in a panic. Standing at the end of the hallway was the outline of a dark figure. I slowly reached for the light. When I turned it on, standing at the end of the hallway outside of my son's bedroom was Ben from the classroom. I didn't know what to do or what to say. Ben smiled and said, "Hey, Miss Jones. Nice house." Then he walked into my son's bedroom and shut the door. He was holding something in his hand, but I couldn't tell what it was from where I was standing. I ran back into my bedroom and called 911. I woke up my husband, and immediately he ran to our son's room. As he entered the room, Ben was trying to climb out the window. He tried to grab him, but he ended up jumping from the 2-story window to the ground. He landed on his feet and continued running. My husband stayed with me and waited for the police. I told the officer who he was. They went to Ben's house and spoke with his parents, who told them that Ben had been there all night. When the officer spoke to Ben, he told them that he had been sleeping for hours, so it couldn't have been him. The police basically told me that there was nothing they could do. Seemed crazy to me. This kid was literally in my house. They said if something happens again, call them. But until then, they weren't able to do anything. I barely went outside for the rest of the summer. I changed all our locks just in case and invested in cameras all around the house. My husband told me that he probably got our home address from my ID, which was in my purse. That would explain why my purse wasn't in the drawer. What still makes me sick is that he was entering my son's room. I can't even imagine what he was doing in there. What if my son had been home? My son spent a lot of time with his cousin last summer because I was terrified to have him sleep at home. When he's older, I'll tell him why. As of writing the story, I have no idea where Ben is. Thankfully, there's never been another incident. I don't get it, though. He was always a nice kid in class, and he always respected the other students and me. That night, when I saw him in the hallway, was the first time I got to witness in real time what mother's intuition is. If I had stayed in bed 10 seconds longer, I would have never seen Ben in the hallway. We currently have our house on the market and hope to move very soon. When I'm out of that house, I'll finally be able to get a good night's sleep.